This supernatural horror film follows a family whose lives are torn apart after moving into a massive, enigmatic estate, where they inadvertently trigger an interdimensional gateway fueled by sinister mathematical equations and hidden audio recordings.
dy by dx.
The legacy of this house is dark, as no family ever manages to stay for very long before eventually vanishing without a trace. The story opens with a new family moving into the enormous property. The space is still cluttered with unpacked moving boxes, as they have barely begun to settle into their new surroundings. The household consists of Kira, her husband Brian, their teenage daughter Ellie, and her younger brother Stephen. While young Stephen is thrilled about having a much larger house to run around in, Ellie is deeply unhappy about the relocation. She feels the new home isolates her from her friends and strips her away from the familiar life she cherished. While wandering through the corridors, Ellie begins to spot odd remnants left behind by the previous occupants. The walls are lined with strange, old paintings, and nearly every doorway features cryptic symbols carved with distinctive triangular markings directly underneath them. When Ellie questions why these peculiar items are still up, Kira reassures her that they simply haven't had the opportunity to clean out the house yet, noting that most of it will eventually be thrown in the trash. Ellie's sense of dread intensifies when she decides to explore the basement. The subterranean space is vast, pitch black, and radiates an uncomfortable energy that makes it hard to stand there for long. While she is investigating the darkness, the heavy basement door suddenly slams shut on its own, locking her inside. Terrified, she screams for her parents to get her out, initially believing her family is pulling a mean prank on her. However, her annoyance turns to genuine panic when Brian tries the handle from the outside and realizes it is completely jammed. Trapped in the shadows, Ellie feels an overwhelming sensation that something is lurking in the dark, watching her every move. Fortunately, Brian spots a key hanging on a nearby wall and manages to unlock the door, allowing his shaken daughter to escape. This frightening experience leaves Ellie absolutely certain that a malicious presence dwells within their new home. Seeking comfort in isolation, she retreats to her bedroom. Kira goes upstairs to check on her, attempting to connect with her daughter and even sharing details about a major work assignment she is managing. As a rebellious teenager, Ellie reacts with sharp irritation, openly dismissing her mother's career. Before heading out, Kira asks Ellie to put aside her attitude and look after Stephen for the evening, explaining that she and Brian have to stay late at the office. Ellie reluctantly agrees to the task. Before her parents walk out the door, Ellie demands to know why they had to buy this specific house, but Kira's vague response about securing the family's future fails to comfort her. Later that evening, the parents depart for work, leaving the siblings alone in the quiet house. Desperate to connect with her old life, Ellie calls a friend to chat. As she talks, completely unnoticed by her, the door directly behind her back slowly creaks open on its own.
It's nothing.
Moments later, Stephen jumps out wearing a terrifying skull mask, successfully scaring his sister. After getting a harsh scolding, Stephen leads Ellie to the playroom cabinet where he uncovered the mask. The interior of the cabinet is dark, dusty, and draped in thick cobwebs. While examining the space, they stumble upon an antique gramophone that surprisingly still functions perfectly.
dy by dx. 1.
When Ellie places the needle on the record, a man's voice begins reciting a bizarre mathematical formula, transitioning into a slow, rhythmic countdown of numbers. Oddly, as the voice counts, the electrical current throughout the house begins to fluctuate violently, causing the lights to waver. Feeling a deep sense of wrongness, Ellie cuts the audio before the voice can finish counting. Etched into the vinyl record is a specific name alongside the exact mathematical formula they just heard. Though unsettled, Ellie pushes the discovery out of her mind and spends the rest of the night watching television in the living room. Unbeknownst to her, a freezing draft begins to seep out from the crack beneath the basement door. Soon after, the lights begin to flicker aggressively, appliances shut down on their own, and the television screen abruptly goes completely black. Terrified by the sudden blackout, Ellie immediately rings her mother to report that the entire house has lost power. Assuming it is a simple tripped circuit, Kira instructs her daughter to head down to the basement to check the breaker panel. Ellie fiercely objects, still traumatized by being trapped down there earlier. Kira manages to calm her fears, promising to remain on the line with her the entire time. Thinking of Stephen sleeping through the dark house, Ellie finds the courage to open the door. Armed only with a single candle, she begins her slow descent into the void of the cellar. To keep her focused, Kara tells her to count each step aloud as she walks down, noting that there are exactly 10 steps to the bottom. At first, Ellie carefully counts her way down, but the moment her foot lands on the 10th step, her body suddenly collapses as if she has been knocked unconscious. Strangely, over the phone line, Kara can still hear her daughter's voice mechanically repeating numbers past 10, even though the physical staircase has already ended. What makes the situation truly horrifying is that Ellie completely stops responding to her mother's frantic screams. Sensing immediate danger, Kara and Brian abandon their work and race back home. They head straight for the cellar, but Ellie has vanished. The space shows no signs of a struggle or forced entry. It is as if the teenagers simply dissolved into the air. The police are called, launching an extensive search of the property and the surrounding neighborhood, but they find absolutely nothing. Brian tries to rationalize the nightmare by suggesting Ellie simply ran away because she hated the move, pointing out that she had a history of running away in the past. Kara completely rejects this theory, intuitively knowing that whatever took her daughter happened the moment she stepped into that basement. As days bleed into weeks with no updates, Kara is consumed by a crushing weight of guilt, blaming her own instructions for her daughter's disappearance. While Brian tries to reassure her that Ellie is likely hiding out at a friend's place, Kara's maternal instincts tell her otherwise. Refusing to wait around for the police, she launches her own investigation, plastering missing person flyers across the town and badgering the detectives daily. The authorities look into Ellie's digital footprint, uncovering evidence of severe online bullying, but Kara is certain that the internet has nothing to do with her daughter's fate. While wandering the house, Kara notices an odd Latin phrase painted above the front entrance, "Solviti coagula." Upon researching the words, she discovers it is an old alchemical maxim meaning that something must be completely broken down before it can be rebuilt. Trying to piece together the hours leading up to the disappearance, she questions Stephen about anything unusual. He mentions the old gramophone and the record they played, but Kara dismisses it as irrelevant at the time. Instead, her fixation remains on the basement. Armed with an ultraviolet flashlight, she returns to the cellar to investigate. Under the UV light, she is horrified to see that every step on the staircase is physically numbered from 1 to 10, and a complex mathematical equation has been carved deep into the concrete floor below. Even more shocking, the basement walls are covered in grotesque, frightening illustrations that are completely invisible to the naked eye. When the police dismiss these findings as meaningless graffiti, Kara becomes entirely convinced that the structure is harborer to an ancient, dark secret. The detectives question where they bought the property, and Brian admits they purchased the estate at an auction for an unbelievably low price. Later that night, after tucking Stephen back into bed, Kara is awakened by a faint, ghostly whispering. Following the sound of someone softly counting numbers, she is led through the dark hallways until she finds herself standing directly outside the basement door. In the dark, she accidentally kicks a loose ball, which bounces down the stairs into the shadows below. Instantly, the whispering stops. When she flips the light switch, the ball is gone, but her eyes lock onto the mathematical formula etched into the concrete. For the first time, Kara begins to realize that the symbols, the numbers, and the paranormal events are all pieces of a singular puzzle. The next morning, she confronts Brian about the symbols over the doorways, but he dismisses her fears, believing she is letting grief warp her perception. Driven by instinct, Kara contacts the auction house to demand records on the previous owner. When the agent asks for time to dig up the files, Kara takes matters into her own hands, photographing every symbol in the house and handing them to a coworker to decode. Despite being distracted during a major company meeting, her coworker delivers a breakthrough before the day ends. The symbols are Hebrew letters that, when assembled correctly, spell out a singular, ominous name, Leviathan. On her way to pick up Stephen from school, she learns her son got into a physical altercation after a classmate cruelly claimed Ellie was dead. After returning home, Kara's research reveals that Leviathan is historically known as a colossal primordial beast, making her deeply suspicious of the house's architecture. Her mind flashes back to the gramophone record. Believing it holds the key, she plays the vinyl once more. As the physicist's voice begins reciting the equations and counting, objects in the playroom begin to shift on their own, and the cabinet door slowly swings open. Stephen walks into the room in a complete trance, mimicking the countdown in unison with the machine. The moment Kira realizes what is happening, she rips the needle off the record, snapping Stephen back to reality. The boy looks around in total confusion, having no memory of the event. While inspecting the old oil paintings left behind, Kira finally uncovers the identity of the man in the portrait, John Featherston. Her research reveals a terrifying truth. John was a brilliant physicist who vanished without a trace years ago along with his entire family inside this very house. The sole survivor of the tragedy was his youngest daughter, Rose Featherston. That night, the house attacks again. The basement door flies open, and the lights cut out one by one, plunging the home into total darkness just like the night Ellie vanished. Through the pitch black, Kira hears Stephen screaming for help from behind the locked basement door.
Help, I'm still... Just a second, okay?
The key is missing from its hook, and when Kira peers through the keyhole, she sees a grotesque, non-human entity staring back. Suddenly, Stephen taps her on the shoulder from behind, perfectly safe. The voice in the cellar was an imitation. Moments later, the basement door swings open on its own, the power restores instantly, and the missing key inexplicably drops onto the floor. Kira hangs it up, gathers her resolve, and steps into the cellar alone. The door immediately slams shut, trapping her. A sudden gust of wind knocks her phone, her only light source, out of her hand. In the darkness, she hears heavy footsteps and low growls creeping toward her.
The key! Where's the key?
Outside, Stephen tries desperately to unlock the door but fails. Fortunately, Brian arrives home just in time to open it. Despite Kira's frantic explanations, Brian attributes everything to the severe emotional trauma of losing Ellie. Frustrated, Kira demands he go downstairs to retrieve her dropped phone so he can see the danger for himself. While searching the dark steps, Brian doesn't find the phone, but he pulls a strange, thick clump of hair from the shadows and catches a fleeting glimpse of something moving in the dark. Still, he convinces himself it is all a series of coincidences. The following day, Kira takes the basement formula to a university mathematics professor named Remy. Upon analyzing the notes, Remy reveals that the equation is far too complex for standard mathematics, carrying a weight that goes beyond mere calculation. When Kira mentions John Featherston, Remy is stunned. The very office they are standing in belonged to John before his disappearance. After returning home, Remy calls Kira's new number in a panic. He explains that before she reactivated the line, he had tried calling her old phone, and someone or something had answered. There was no dialogue, only the sound of an entity endlessly counting numbers. Remy then shares a disturbing historical parallel. After consulting colleagues, he discovered the exact same mathematical formula was found in an old house in Belgium where every single resident had also mysteriously vanished. The formula dates back to a 15th century alchemist and is directly tied to theories of interdimensional travel. Kira presents this to Brian, explaining that the symbols spell Leviathan, though she still doesn't understand the triangles below them. Brian remains deeply skeptical. To force him to face reality, she drags him down to the cellar to show him the numbered stairs and the floor carvings. As they argue, the cabinet door in the playroom swings open. Stephen approaches it, noticing the interior now looks impossibly deep and dark. In the basement, a furious Brian tries to smash the floor equation with a tool, but the concrete emits a heavy metallic resonance. Simultaneously, the gramophone upstairs begins playing on its own, broadcasting Featherston's voice counting aloud. Standing before the open cabinet, Stephen watches a figure crawl out of the pitch black. It is Ellie. He screams for his parents, but by the time they sprint into the room, the figure is gone, and the supernatural activity cuts out the moment the recording hits the number 10. Near the cabinet, Brian discovers Ellie's physical cell phone, finally forcing him to accept that the house is haunted by an impossible force. Seeking the ultimate truth, Kira visits Rose Featherston at a nursing home. The moment the elderly woman hears that Kira's family lives in her childhood home and that a daughter has gone missing, her face drops. She takes a piece of paper and writes down a single word, Leviathan. Rose explains that her father was a renowned scientist who turned to the occult and mathematical dimensions when a family member fell terminally ill, becoming entirely obsessed with an entity he called Leviathan. She warns Kira that the infection isn't just confined to the cellar. The entire house is the entity. On her drive back, Kira tries to call Remy, but the call is hijacked by the endless looping of whispered numbers. At the house, Brian maps out the triangles found beneath the doorway symbols and realizes that when they are overlaid, they form a perfect pentagram, the sigil of Baphomet, an ancient demonic entity. The hand posture of Baphomet perfectly mirrors the odd pose John Featherston is striking in his family portrait, and the phrase Solviti Coagula is directly tied to the demon's lore. The entire house was mathematically designed as a monument to this entity. Suddenly, Steven's toy drone loses control, flying on its own accord straight into the open basement. Unaware of the danger, the boy follows it down. At the same time, Kira sets the gramophone record to play again to find an escape. As Featherston's voice echoes the equations, the counting takes hold of Steven in the cellar. He walks down the numbered stairs in a deep trance. When he reaches the bottom and picks up his drone, he turns to find the massive, terrifying form of Baphomet standing directly beside him. The power cuts out, Steven screams, and his parents rush down only to find his abandoned drone on the floor. In the middle of their panic, the ball from earlier rolls out of the darkness, followed by the sound of rhythmic counting. They trace the sound to the playroom cabinet, which has now expanded into a massive, pitch-black void. They spot Steven walking within the darkness of the cabinet and drag him out, finding his body burning with a fever. When they pull off his shirt, a bloody pentagram is freshly carved into his flesh. In a hypnotic trance, Steven mutters that he has just ridden a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns before sliding back into his countdown. Kara turns around to find that Brian has completely vanished, tracking him down to find him in the exact same catatonic state, counting down backward.
41, 40.
When his countdown hits the final number, the darkness shifts, and Kira comes face to face with the towering demon Baphomet. With no escape, Kira flees directly into the basement. As she runs down the steps, she discovers the staircase has warped into a vertical, bottomless labyrinth. With the demonic entity hot on her heels, she descends deep into the abyss until she breaks through into a terrifying new reality. She finds herself in a colossal, endless dimension filled with millions of souls spanning different eras and cultures. Every single person stands in massive, looping lines, completely hollowed out and endlessly chanting numbers in 1,000 different languages. In this horrifying realization, Kira finally understands the grand design. The floor equations, the numbered steps, the Hebrew symbols, and Featherston's audio recordings were never a traditional haunting or magic ritual. The physicist had used pure mathematics and sound frequencies to construct a literal, permanent gateway to an outer world. Every time the record is played, anyone who hears the sequence is immediately pulled into this infinite, terrifying cosmic loop. Searching through the endless sea of hollowed-out entities chanting in unison, Kara's eyes catch a sudden glimpse of a familiar mark, a distinct tattoo on a young girl's skin. It is Ellie. Shoving her way through the dense, tranced crowd, Kira reaches her daughter, who stands completely dazed, echoing the numbers like a machine. Kira fiercely breaks the girl out of her hypnotic stupor and pulls her back toward the towering, infinite staircase that serves as the lone tether back to their home. As they make their frantic ascent, the heavy, echoing footsteps of Baphomet reverberate through the void behind them. Oddly, the demonic entity makes absolutely no attempt to pursue or capture them. Though an eerie sense of wrongness hangs heavy in the air, Kira pushes through the dread, dragging her daughter upward until they finally cross the threshold back into their living room. In the safety of the house, Ellie slowly regains her awareness, while Brian and Steven similarly wake up from their catatonic states, seemingly freed from the entity's grasp. For a fleeting moment, Kira breathes a sigh of relief, convinced the horror has drawn to a close. Knowing the house is a cursed monument, she insists they pack nothing and flee the property immediately. However, the moment Kira flings the front door open to escape, her heart drops. Instead of the street and the outside neighborhood, she is met with a bottomless staircase plunging directly into absolute, suffocating darkness. In that shattering moment, the absolute horror of their situation becomes clear. They never truly made it back home. While they desperately believed only Ellie had been claimed by the void, the truth was far more sinister. Every single time the tape spun on the gramophone and every time one of them set foot in the cellar, the entire family was being incrementally digested by the entity's realm. Kira finally understands the demon's mocking patience. Baphomet never chased them because there was simply no need to run, they were already firmly locked inside its cage. The very walls they thought protected them were no longer rooted in the human world, having been completely integrated into the dark dimension. Within seconds, the psychological rot returns. Ellie, Stephen, and Brian's eyes go completely blank as they resume their mindless, rhythmic counting, turning in unison to march back toward the cellar doors. Left with no agency and completely consumed by the environment, Kira falls into line behind her family, her own voice whispering the numbers as she follows them down into the dark.